All right, so in that last one, we ended off where we were going to talk about building apps into our project. Now, apps are not what you might think. It's not like how iOS or Android works, where you actually install an app onto your phone or actually download and install an app onto your computer. It's not quite like that. Apps are more, when it comes to Django, apps are really handling some type of function and then the data around that function. So what I mean is, if you had a product or you wanted to have products on your site, you would have an app specifically for that. So that app would handle the way the products are stored in the database, the way they're viewed on any web page, like what we've talked about with views, any type of web form that would be to like add new products or something like that. All of that would be within one app that would be for products specifically. Now, if you have products, it's likely that you'll have a shopping cart too. So then there'd be a whole nother app for carts, so shopping carts, all that. So basically, the point of that is whenever you want to add a new function, especially functionality that's like a big time functionality, like having products is a functionality. Anytime you want to do that, you want to have it in its own self-contained app. Now, the code will still work if you have the app or all these functions into one app. Let's say, for instance, you did products and cart in one app together. It would still work, but as far as best practices, it's not suggested that you go about doing that. So, like, if we look at our code and we jump into the settings.py file, and if we scroll down, we already have these default installed apps, and that's what they do. Like Django.contrib.admin handles the admin app. So admin as in the admin site. So if we go into our local project here and we go into the admin, this is the app for the admin. The whole app is specifically for this admin. Now, this admin app also can work with other apps, as we'll see in the future, but what we see right here is auth. So that's this app right here. So everything that's related to authentication and users is going to be in this default app. So that's kind of something you should think about when you're designing your own apps and what you're going to be doing going forward. Because really, I'm just giving you kind of a basic introduction to using apps and using data. But when it comes down to it, you will start to build onto these apps on your own, and you're going to want to have it kind of apps set out just like I've already said, where they're separate, the functions are separate, and all that. All right, so now that we've exhausted that, we've talked about it quite a bit, let's actually create our own custom app. So we're not using a Django built-in installed app. We're going to be using our own custom app. So we're going to write some code to actually store some data. Well, if we look at our model of what we're copying, or the reference of what we're going after is swiftforentrepreneurs.com. If we scroll down, we have this email field here, and that's what that is. So this is actually, when I go on this email field and I hit join now, it actually is storing this email. It's going to store it into the database, and how that whole transaction happens has to be monitored in some way, in some form, right? So now if I navigate to this URL at any time, it should take me right to this page, and you would be able to see this page as well. Because this is a public page, right? So this page is public. So this is all being handled by a specific app. And the app, I called it Join or Joins. That's the name of the app that I called it. So let's actually create that app now. And I'm going to close out my terminal. And I will just go Python manage.py, start app, and I'll call it Joins. All right, so this is creating new code for our app, and what it does is it already makes that folder. So what we see in here, all that is doing is just making default code for us. You could do this manually, entering each one of these one by one, but you want to have, using Start App just makes it a lot easier. Now, if you wanted to copy this entire app and then change the name of it and change some things about it, you could literally just copy this folder into the Django project, and it would basically be able to be used in the future too, which I'll actually even show you how to do that here shortly. So now I'll just discuss a little bit about apps. Init.py, what that does is register this whole folder as a Python file, as we've discussed before. Admin.py is how we can actually register it into the admin, the Django admin, this here. Models, this is how we actually store our data into our database. So it's kind of like the instructions that we would write for what the database tables should look like. I mean, kind of think of it that way. We'll see what that means here shortly. Tests, we're going to ignore tests for now. Views.py is kind of how you actually see the views specifically for this joins, right? So we did views already here. So this one is going to be for that specific app, right? So if it was going to be products, you would have a view for like single, and then you'd have a view for like all products, right? So that's kind of what views would do. But again, we're not really going to go too much into all the different views that you can do. But what we are going to do right now is we're actually going to change this home page from the view in here. I'm going to comment it out, and I'm actually going to copy it. I'm going to bring it over to this views and uncomment this stuff out, because what we want to do actually here is I'm not going to have my views on this main root configuration folder. I don't want it in there because, well, it doesn't come in there by default, but I want my app to actually be handling the view that corresponds to what it's going to be doing. So in this case, joins, my homepage for the whole site is about joins. It's about this app. It's about getting people to join, right? So the homepage for the entire site then should be pointed to this app's homepage. So if we go into URLs, all I need to do now is just change this right here to joins. And then so it's joins.views.home. And that's where that view now lives. See, so you can actually move things, but you have to remember when you do move something that you have to update things that rely on it. So in this case, we moved the view from one view to another, and then we changed the URL that relied on it to this new spot. So let's go ahead and save it. I'm going to run the server again. And then we're going to go back into Chrome, and we'll look at our home page one more time. And let the server run up first. All right, so now that we've got the server running, we can see that the home page is still exactly the same, right? So if we go in here, it's the exact same home page, right? Because it's using the same template, and everything about it is the same as the old one that we had before. But from here on out, this is the one we're going to use. All right, so now what we want to do is actually store this data. So inside of models, we are going to create a new class that will allow us to have multiple instances of some type of data. I'll discuss all these things as we go forward, but that's essentially what it's going to be doing. So if you're familiar with Python classes, this might be a little review, but basically what we're doing is we're creating a class, and it's going to inherit from one of the Django classes, and then each instance of the class will be stored in the database. All right, so this is what we'll do is class, and I'm going to call it join. So models.model, and model has to be capitalized. So models would be imported from here, and then .model is a class within inside of this models right here. And it has to be capitalized. That's just one of the conventions for doing classes. So join, it's a single, we're calling it a single thing. Like you wouldn't call it joins because each instance of join is a join instance, so it'd be one single thing, where if it was all of the instances of join, then it would be plural, right? So just keep that in mind. You want to use these as singular versus plural. That's kind of the gist there. And now we just want to grab an email field. So I'll do email equals models.email field. And that's it. So we have our email field. That's pretty much all I really want for our email field. And then maybe I want to do a timestamp, so like when they actually did it. So it's models.date time field. And we got auto. There's two parameters that we can pass in here. Auto now, add. And we can say true or false here. And I'll just explain what these mean. And then auto now. Okay, so we have auto now and auto now add. Auto now add means whenever this was added to the database, set the time to being that. If the model was updated, set the time to being that. That's what auto now is. So auto now add is only really one time. So if it will set it up once, versus auto now, it will set it up when it's updated. So that being said, we can just copy this and paste it in here, and then just change these two around, so false to true, and then change this to called updated. So that's it. These two are how that would be standard. So like timestamp means when it was added to the database, updated means the last time this email or this actual instance of this model was changed. This might be a little confusing at this point, so just bear with me for a second. Once we actually put it into the database, it will make a lot more sense. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to define what's called a Unicode. So Unicode is important for us. It's a little bit more, it's mainly so we can name the instance. That's a big part of the reason that we use a Unicode. It's different in Python 3, but for now we're essentially naming the individual instance some name. And all I'm going to do is return an empty string called join. So this string we will change later, but for now we're just going to look at it as this. All right, so I've created the model for it. So now that I have a model for the app, I can actually add it to my installed apps. So you need to have a model in order for installed apps to really work exactly the way we want it to. So if I added joins in here into installed apps, I can now run python manage.py syncdb. And what we see here is it's creating the tables, or the table joins underscore join, right? So the app is joins, the model is join. All right, so that means now that we have it actually ready to be accepted into our database. So we actually just need to try it out, and it's really simple. All we do is we're going to add it into the admin, and there's a few ways we can do customization in the admin, but for now we're just going to do very simple stuff, and all I'll do is from .models import join. So .models would mean it's a relative import to this app. So it's going to look in the same folder. That's what this dot does, basically. And then it looks for a file called models. And then within that file, it's looking for a class called join. So that's how that import works. So now that I have that imported, I could just do admin.site.register and then join. All right, so if we wanted more customization to our admin, this is kind of where we would do it. So I'm going to just go ahead and add the ability to do customization right now, even though we might not actually get to it. But it's admin, model admin, admin.model admin, and then the class meta model equals to join. So basically, if I want to at some point have any customization to this, this is how I would do it. Otherwise, I could just leave it where if this was just like that, that will actually register it in the admin. Whereas if I want to do customization in the admin, I would just add this. And that's why I kind of do this by default, just so I don't have to do it later. I can just have it already ready there and ready to go. All right, so now this means I just added it into the admin, just like what we've seen with all these other ones. So let's go ahead and run the server again. So python manage.py, run server, and we'll go back into Chrome, make sure the server is running. Let's go into admin, and we see now joins the app, and then joins, this is plural, right? So as you see, we called it join in our model, but when it comes on the admin, it actually is joins, so it's plural. So these are like email joins, right? So if I click on this, it says 0 joins, so nobody has joined. Select join, so individual to change. So if I add one, I've got an email here, so I can actually add in an email. So I do. I added Coding for Entrepreneurs in, hit save, and now I see that it says join. All right, so that's the Unicode right there. That's the name of the actual model itself, or the instance of the model. And so we can actually change this to be a little bit smarter. So I could just say self.email. If I change the self.email, it's getting the instance of this model, and it's grabbing that one email that's there. So if I refresh here, I see now it says codingforentrepreneurs@gmail.com. If I do self timestamp, let's see what happens. I refresh in here, and we've got this error that it has no encode. Well, that's because this has to be a string. So if we did string of self.timestamp, it will give us the timestamp in a date and time fashion. So this is when it was actually added into the model or into the admin, or excuse me, into the database. So once it was added into the database, it created this timestamp for us automatically. And by adding it into making it a string, it shows us when that actual string showed up, or like when it was actually added. So let's actually take this out and let's keep it as email for our Unicode data. And let's add the timestamp and updated in here. So we'll go back into admin.py, and above this we'll do list display. And now we're going to display the items that are coming from the model itself, right? So any of these items can be inside of list display. So let's go back into the admin, and I could do email, I could do time stamp, and I could do updated. All right, so the list display. So let's actually see what that does. If I refresh, it now shows me the email, timestamp, and updated. Now don't get this confused with Unicode, right? I did not put the Unicode here, I put the email. So if I wanted to change the email or the Unicode, just so we can test that, so hi, and then %s. So I'm using string substitution here. Basically whatever's here will substitute here. So if we did a few more, we would have to just add a few more. Right, so this one substitutes for the first one, this one, second one, third one, and so on. And that's pretty cool about string substitution. So we'll leave the Unicode as like that. If I refresh in here, this didn't change at all. And that's because, again, with our admin, with our list display, what we did was we said email, not Unicode. So if I add the Unicode in here with the 2 underscores there, it's into the list now. Now we have Unicode, email, timestamp, and updated. I can refresh. I now see the Unicode. It says exactly what we should see. Hi, the email 3 times, and then email, and then also, if you notice, join. So the name of the Unicode, the title of the column itself is going to be whatever the model is. All right, so that's probably getting a little too much as far as the admin goes, but nevertheless, it is still pretty cool to see that we now have our Unicode working. Sorry, I'm going to change some stuff. So I made the list display just to show those 3, and then I'm going to get rid of those extra 2, as well as hi, and keep it as 1. So that's another way to turn it into a string. So there we go. So we have our email, and what we see here is we have August 1 and August 1. So updated and timestamp are the exact same. So if I come in here and just say Coding for Entrepreneurs 2, which is not a real email address, but I save it, I now see that, hey, look, 4 minutes later, it changed. Right? So that's where updated and timestamp goes. Where timestamp did not change, that was when it was added into the database. This is when it was updated. And that is exactly how this stuff works right here. Now, at this point, you might be wondering, okay, well, how do I know what these fields are? How do I change these fields? And then also admin stuff. There's a lot to it. All right, so if we just Google Django models, Django model fields, and we can actually get right into the model field reference. I click on this, and right away I should notice, well, there's this yellow warning basically because we're in the development version, which we want to be in the 1.6. So these are all the different fields. There's a field reference to everything within Django. So you can scroll down to kind of see all the different things that we worked with here. But the actual field types themselves are down here at hashtag field types. And you can see, well, auto field, that's an integer field, as it says right there, automatically set primary key, blah, blah, blah. There's all types of things. A Boolean field, so yes or no value. If you want to accept null values, then use null Boolean field. Char field's another big one. This is one that we probably use a lot. Email field, the difference between email field and char field is email field will actually check whether or not it's an email. So it will check whether or not it's a valid email. So if I go into join and I do just ABC and hit save, it's going to say, hey, you need to put an email in here, which is nice. So it runs that check for us versus a char field would just be a character field. So looking back in here, this would just be any character field, and you can kind of jump in and try that out too. We used date and time field on our timestamps, but there is also a date field, and it does have those similar parameters that we see here. right? So there are those similar parameters too. And then there's a decimal field. So these are required. When you see like these different arguments here, those are actually required. So if they're actually listed out here, those arguments are required when it comes to actually writing these fields. And just like what we did with date and time field, that's how you actually would add it in. So what I would suggest now is challenge yourself to actually add new fields based off of these field types. So you can actually kind of like make a new model. Not that it's absolutely necessary, because we will actually do it in future videos, but it's good for you to just try these things out on your own, because realistically, if you break something, all you have to do is delete everything and then go to our GitHub and then download that code or whatever, wherever you left off, and then you can just use that versus worrying about too much of like rewatching the videos to get the code right and stuff like that. So yeah, and then there's a way to do file uploading. That's a little bit more challenging because we don't have everything set up yet, so I wouldn't necessarily jump into a file field yet. But there is all types of fields that really handle all the things that we need. Integer fields, IP address field. This will be useful for us here soon. And then we will also have, there's positive integer field, so it only has positive numbers or 0, and it goes up to this many numbers. So yeah, there's all types of things. Slug field is like URL slugs. So this right here, it would be an example of a slug, minus the hashtag. And then this is also a slug. This is also, but a slug version is like that. We cover that quite a bit in other videos. But yeah, so that's it for now. URL field. This is it for models and adding an app. I know it's a lot of data, but we covered a lot, and you can now actually store data using the admin, but what we need to do is actually store data using what's called a form and also hooking it into our view. So that's actually what we will do here soon. All right, we'll see you in the next one.